I'm just excited to hear everything about this. I mean, this docuseries is like nothing I've ever seen personally. So I would love if you could just introduce yourself and tell us what the Book of Queer is.
Sure. My name is Dr. Eric Cervini. I have a PhD in queer history, and the Book of Queer is a queer history variety show, an extravaganza of music and comedy. And it tells stories from our queer past that have been hidden from at least the textbooks, certainly the textbooks where I come from in Texas, for far too long. And it tells these stories with joy, with comedy, and with humor and music. And I think that's so important, especially right now with our community being under attack, to not just be defiant, not just tell stories of resistance, but to show that we didn't just survive, we also thrived. We also found love and community, and we're able to create art despite some of these difficult times. And I think really focusing on that resilience and beauty despite really terrible circumstances is something that we could all use right now.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know when you started recording this, but I feel like as, time goes on, it just becomes more relevant with everything that is just going on right now. Like I couldn't hit at a better time. Mm-hmm. But I did want to ask just about finding these. Like you said, it's not in textbooks. So when you were studying, like, were you looking for it, or was this something that you came across and then kind of grew more passionate about?
Yeah, a bit of both. I started my grad school education. The first thing you do is just you read what's been done, what's been written already. And there are so many queer scholars, queer historians who have done incredible research, whether it's in the US, whether it's in Europe, whether it's in Asia, all over the world. There are scholars who have been working on this field. However, because often that research isn't accessible because of homophobic legislation, because of school boards that are terrified of getting sued now, they're not really able to share this research with the wider world. So I think that's where this show comes in, is to kind of bridge that gap and to share some of the incredible stories that historians have been uncovering for decades. We partnered with 18 different queer historians to tell just as many stories, focusing on, all the way back to ancient Egypt, to Mesopotamia, and all the way to essentially present day. And so it was very difficult to find those stories, given the wealth of research that's been done by so many incredible scholars, many of whom we were able to partner with in sharing these stories.
I love it so much. I mean, and like I said, it's very different in the way that it is presented. And you said, there's music and comedy and all these different aspects that go into it. It's not just, reading it, even just in video. So I wanted to ask, just like, when you were creating it, were you worried that it wouldn't be taken as seriously as you wanted the message to come across? Or did you just hope that everyone accepted, the fun and education of it all?
Fortunately, I think we always put the entertainment after the truth. You know what I mean? I think we really, really wanted to make sure we understood the history first. We wanted to tell these stories responsibly. If we were telling a trans story, we're going to have a trans historian or a trans comedy writer write these stories and help share it and review it. And then we're able to add in some of the comedy, add in some of the music based off of what is it that we're revealing here? What is the theme or the central message of this story, whether it's queer political power and how we've been in charge, going all the way back to what we may be able to call a non-binary ancient Egyptian pharaoh. There's so many stories that just are so fascinating to begin with. It wasn't hard to make it entertaining, but I think being able to laugh and have fun at the same time is crucial. And so I don't think you have to choose between entertainment and good storytelling or responsible historical analysis. You can have both at the same time. And I think that's what this show tries to prove.
For the audience that is, taking in all of this information, who are you hoping to target at? Like, is it an older, a younger youth? Obviously, we're looking at queer people, but others can also appreciate it, especially in, Pride Month. But what were you kind of trying to target?
When I first started making my little Instagram videos that eventually became this show, I was personally targeting the LGBTQ plus community, especially folks younger, at the same age as me, because frankly, there isn't as much intergenerational dialogue as I think there should be. And so that was where it began. However, I think this show has a much broader appeal because it's teaching not just, young Gen Z queer folks about, the homophile movement or about, the Inquisition. It's also trying to teach our allies, folks who are not yet allies, who are potential allies, and also older generations who are, have maybe a very limited life perspective, and might want to think about other places where queer history is equally important. I always say that my biggest takeaway from being a queer historian is how little I know. I'm always learning. And I think that's what we try to also do, is to show there's no one comprehensive telling of our history. It's infinite. And this is just a tiny, tiny little sliver of some of those stories.
So just speaking of those stories, I mean, there's so many packed into this docuseries, but did you have a favorite, or can you tell us just about some of the ones that were really cool to learn about, but then also to recreate?
Oh, they were so fun. Our very first episode, which just came out on Thursday, is looking at whether Abraham Lincoln, the celebrated president, may have been queer, looking at his 4 relationships with other men, very intimate relationships. And we look at the letters, we look at the facts of who was sharing their bed with whom at any given time. And we're very careful about not labeling him as gay or even bisexual. What we use is this word queer, which just means transcending boundaries of gender and sexuality for any given figure's time period. And I would argue that Lincoln certainly falls within that category. But there are others who are much more openly queer. In that same episode, one of my personal favorites is the story of Bayard Rustin, an openly gay Black man who was the chief architect of the 1963 March on Washington, and who has gone far too long being obscured in textbooks and in other accounts of the Black freedom movement, largely because of his sexual orientation. And when you realize that folks have been either behind the scenes or often literally erased from history books, you realize actually this queer history is much larger, a much bigger part of global human history than we were taught to believe. And I hope it encourages folks to find more stories like Rustin, like Lincoln, like the Pharaoh Akhenaten, because there are so many that still need to be dug up.
And you can see your passion for the project. It is so clear. But I also know that you had this giant team behind you. One of the biggest LGBTQ I see, or the biggest in TV and film. So how did you find that team and those people to trust with this project?
Mm-hmm. It was the honor of a lifetime to work with folks who are so much more talented with me, with musicians, with writers and comedians who take these stories that I, as a historian, was aware of, but to make them into art, to work with our costumer to create these incredible, also very fun, campy outfits, and our set designer to create these very queer reinterpretations of history. And, the cast, like you said, it's the largest all queer cast in the history of Hollywood, with over 30 queer and trans folks participating in telling these stories. And we're really hoping to create a new standard. And frankly, it wasn't that hard to find them. I think you often hear in Hollywood, we looked for someone to play this very important queer historical figure and we just couldn't find them. It's not that hard. There are so many talented queer and trans actors who are just trying to make it to that first credit, that first production. And we were able to find some incredible talent who really brought this show to life, brought so much ad-libbing and improv to it. And we kept a lot of it. You could really tell how much fun we had in this show. But there's just so much love and passion behind the mission of it too, which I hope comes across.
It definitely does. I see it in the episodes that I've watched so far. And I do want to ask about these musical, components, concerts at the end. I mean, what was the inspiration behind that? What did you want to do by just, throwing out a little musical number at the end?
We really started with, how do we make this as authentic to queer experience and expression as we possibly can. And I think music is inextricable from queer storytelling. We sang and we laughed so we wouldn't cry. We did it to survive. And I think in telling these stories, the most authentic way to do that is to break out into song, of course. But also we wanted to show just how exciting this history is. In the very first episode, it's Vincent, the incredible vocalist and songwriter, singing a song called Sashay to the Top. And it's about queer political power. And it embodies some of the themes of the show, about talking about how we actually have been in positions of power, but that's been hidden from us as students of history. And so it's such a fun way, I think, to prove that history actually can be not just beautiful and powerful, but also a lot of fun and entertaining too.
And like you mentioned before, the docuseries has already released an episode. So what has the feedback on that been so far?
It's been amazing. I mean, so many folks who I don't think would have gone to study queer history or gotten a PhD or even enrolled in a queer history class, they now have an education in queer history. I'm so sorry. I have this dog, this puppy that is creating havoc. But anyways, on the flip side, to be honest, there has been a little bit of a reaction from the right-wing media, Breitbart, Newsmax. Some of these websites are very upset about the message of the show, which is to say we've always been here and we've always been queer. That's very scary to them because they're trying to propagate this message that to be non-binary, to be trans, to be queer is a new phenomenon, this new epidemic of queerness. And so this flies in the face of that. So they are attacking us online. They're giving us 1 stars on IMDb. So please, if anyone's listening, go support the show, not just by watching it, but also online. Leave us a review, fight back against these trolls to prove to Hollywood also that queer storytelling has a place and we need it and people enjoy it.